We're chilled. We're good.
Oh, it is recording now. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, I'm recording it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, you may have to send it to me then.
I'll email it.
afterwards.
I'll email it to you. No
Yeah.
problem.
Perfect. All right.
I'll send you the link, so it should work fine for you, shouldn't it? On that.
Yeah.
Cool. Welcome, golfers, to the 27th episode of the Read It, Roll It, Hole It podcast. Super excited to have special guest from America on the call today. So Jason Sutton, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Oli.
No problem at all. Super. Yeah, looking forward to it, man. It's you are the golf guru. That's how you come titled.
That's what they call me.
That's what they call you. Happy days. So to give the listeners a little bit of insight on yourself, you're a Golf Magazine Top 100 coach. You've been a coach for 28 years. You've got podcasts. You've got lots of things going on. You've got an app that I downloaded earlier and had a little look at. Tell us like a little bit about those 28 years and how it sort of come to today.
How far are we going to go back, right? So, I mean, I grew up in a small town in West Virginia, really not a big golfing mecca. So I kind of stumbled into golf, played all sports, was big into baseball, but I played baseball, basketball, and football. Had to sort of make a choice once I got to high school because golf and football were the same season. So I chose golf, which I think was a good decision looking back, and played pretty well as a junior player. Got a scholarship to a small college in West Virginia. Played there for 4 years. Then turned pro. Just went the typical assistant pro route, the PGA route, where I was an assistant in a couple clubs in West Virginia. I was looking to sort of get into a bigger section. So I moved to the Carolina section in 1997 and took an assistant's job. Originally, the head pro leaves. For some odd reason, the GM thought I was ready to be a head professional at 27 and promoted me. So I was there for a couple of years, which was great. Learned a lot, and most importantly, learned what I didn't want to do the rest of my career, which was run a golf club, fold shirts, and tell Mr. Habekamp to play faster. So I fortunately, when I made the decision to start teaching full time, I was looking for the best opportunity in town, which was the Dana Rader Golf School, the top 25 golf school in the country. Dana was a top 100 coach. So she gave me an opportunity, and that really sort of spurred my career on to where I am now. I was there for almost 12 years under her tutelage and sort of gaining reputation, getting better at teaching and coaching. And then the last 9 years I've spent at Carmel Country Club, here in Charlotte, which is a high-end private club, which has been great. It's a really special place, a huge membership. So I got my own little academy there, a couple of guys that work for me. So we're just grinding out every day on lesson tee.
Happy days. Going back to the Dana Academy, what were the sort of biggest things you learned through being sort of the head instructor there and putting a program together, if you like? What was the biggest learnings?
I mean, there was so much, right? I mean, it was an extremely busy place. I mean, in the early 2000s, golf schools were really booming, and we were getting 32 person golf schools every weekend, and then just teaching a ton, right? So it's like, it's always tell young instructors, how do I get better? It's like, put yourself in a position where you can just teach a bunch. And we were doing, I mean, just crazy numbers. So, it was so much more than just learning to teach. It was also learning, how to structure a golf lesson, how to manage a group. I mean, we did a lot of group stuff. So, we were trained to really teach, 6-8 people at a time. Right. So how do you manage those people and make sure they're all getting, your intention and they're all getting better and, putting together structuring golf schools, putting together schedules. I mean, there's so much that you can take from that kind of environment that has helped me now, even though I don't do as many groups now, obviously, but it's all things that we've sort of learned along the way. But more importantly, it was just an opportunity for me to get out and start to build relationships and, start to really work on, getting better as a coach, which, was my only job. So going from where I had 6 jobs as a head pro, now I just got one sort of basic intention of just being the best I could be. So there's a lot to it. And we can get into it, but I mean, I don't know, we're going to talk a lot about putting, but that was when sort of at the end of that tenure, for me, looking back at my career, is like, I wanted to be a very well-rounded coach, right? If a tour player came to me, I wanted to be able to teach him in every avenue. I wanted to be able to, help him with his putting, his full swing, his short game, and his mental game. So that's when I really started diving into, one of my weaknesses. Like, I want to learn more about how to really properly teach putting.
Cool. Like that. That's, yeah, it's interesting to hear the sort of journey there. And, as you're saying about the putting. So did you say that's something you do want to do, or you did?
Oh, I did. I mean,
Yeah, I was going to say.
Now, I would consider myself a part-time putting coach, because, I think everybody's like, well, what's that mean? It means that when players, whether it's tour players, good college players, or juniors, just come to you and say, hey, I just want you to be my putting coach. I mean, that means that, you're building a little bit of a reputation in that area for knowing something about putting. So not that I want to go out and be, a full-time putting coach, because I don't want to go broke. I know how difficult it is. And I have friends that are teaching on tour, and it's, I just want to be able to help, all my players. And I just had a curiosity and a fascination with putting, because I think it's one of the most difficult skills in the game. And it's definitely one of the most difficult skills to teach, if you want to do it at a high level, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. It's certainly a game within a game, I'd say, the putting.
100%.
I love it. As you know, and as you, I'm like majorly passionate about the putting.
Yeah.
And golf, but yeah, it's cool, man. Talk us through, Guru, about the podcast. What I want to know is, and by the way, I'm a massive fan, and I'm not just not here to try and put hot smoke up your ass, but no, I promise you, I love it. I watch, listen to most of them.
Thanks.
And you get some great guests on there. It's always entertaining. What I want to know is, like, why do you do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about it all the time, because as you know, now being a podcaster, it's a lot of work, right? I mean, it's a lot of extra time that I'm putting into it, because especially when you want to do it well, you're doing the editing, you're doing all the, getting the guests, the research, the preparation takes a lot of hours, that I'm not getting paid for, with monetarily, not getting paid dollars, but I get paid in so many other ways, which is, having great guests on the podcast, which I learn from. I've built a lot of people I have on there, obviously I've known before, we've had relationships, but I've had several that I've had that I've never met, and I have the opportunity to spend time with, and we've, now we're collaborating and doing other things. So, I mean, originally I would say it was more of just, it was another platform for me to share, information with other coaches, and then also share some of my brilliant friends that I'm on the phone with or I'm learning from, and bring it to the masses and help, more specifically, probably young coaches is kind of who I had in mind when I started the podcast. Cause I didn't feel like there's plenty of golf podcasts out there, right? There's hundreds of them.
Sure.
Helping average golfers. And that's great. So I wanted to, really my passion is mentoring young coaches and young teachers and, young professionals that are looking to get better at teaching. What do they need to do? What's the roadmap look like? And it's much different now than it was when I was younger. So I'm just helping them navigate that by bringing them the best information and the most accurate information I think out there. Cause I think that's what our job is to not just like golfers, we don't want them to get fluff, right? We don't want them to get stuff that the cliches and the misconceptions when they're teaching, because then that brings our industry down, right? So I'm just trying to basically, as I always say, leave a legacy, which hopefully my legacy is that I shared with other people, made other people better, and ultimately left the teaching game better than I found it.
I love that, Jason. It's great, and yeah, long may it continue, please. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
It's fab. What one thing that's sort of evident speaking to you in the last 10 minutes, whatever it is, and listening to your podcast and doing the research on you, is your want to help, your will to learn is sort of look quite unique. What I want to know is like, where does that come from? Why do you wake up every morning and want to help people so much?
That's a great question. I can't put my finger on probably one thing. And I think partially it was how I was raised, my parents, my family now, my wife, it's just, I think it's more about just being empathetic with, how difficult it is to navigate, whether it's your career or your life. And it's just ultimately just doing the right thing. Right. So I always think about it's just the golden rule, right? So it's how I want to be treated is how I'm going to try to treat other people. So I don't think it was always like that. I think, when I was a younger professional, I felt like, a lot of coaches out there were sort of guarding their information, like they came up with it. Like we haven't come up with anything, or we're all stealing and borrowing information or tips and tactics from other coaches that we've learned from. Right. So I just think it's the right thing to, pass it down. And then once you have a staff, which now I have a little staff, it's like, why would I not want to make them better? Right. I mean, it elevates me, but also it's selfishly when I share something with somebody else, I remember it, I learn it, and I want to improve on it. And then when you get young coaches that are like my coaches that work for me that are really curious and great superstars, they challenge me to get better. Right. So it's, as we always say, iron sharpens iron. So when you're trying to help other people, it's not a one-way street. I'm getting most of the help because it's forcing me to get better. It's forcing me to continue to grow and learn. But yeah, I think it's just doing the right thing, man. It's innate. I mean, I ask that question in my podcast all the time. It's like, where does that come from? And it's a difficult one to answer. It's an evolution of just who you want to be and who you want to be, how you want to be known by other people.
Like that. It's like it's part of your journey, and it's
absolutely.
What's your sort of your why then? What's your where is your you see your journey going to? What's your big sort of why in life?
I mean, it's another good question that I reflect on a lot. And I was listening to a podcast the other day. It was not a golf podcast, but I think it was a performance coach on there, and he was talking about an exercise that he was giving his players, and it was to come up with like 6 to 8 words of how you describe yourself when you're happiest or when you are what you consider successful, right? And I sort of did that in my head, and I was like, it's not about winning awards. It's not about getting on lists. It's not about, any accolades or recognition that I get that really fulfills me. It's more about how do I treat other people, right? It's like, how do I affect other people that are around me, that spend time with me, reach out to me, that I still can't believe people reach out to me for help. I mean, because I just don't view myself that way. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to reach out to other people as well. So it's kind of a continuous cycle, but that's me right there. That's what fills my cup, is seeing other people get better or achieve their goals because of what I've done to affect them.
Brilliant. It's a great legacy to have for sure. And the rest of the cup gets filled with wine.
Absolutely. Red wine.
Red wine. We can have some long conversations about red wine. It's a big I know it's a massive passion of yours, and I just love, well, don't know if I study it, but I love drinking it.
There you go. That's the best part.
We'll come yeah, definitely. We'll come on to wine. I think we'll go down that rabbit hole in a bit, but just sticking to you for now. Go and who are your sort of biggest influences growing up? Or not growing up, but in your golfing career, who's inspired you?
I mean, it's, the list is so long, right? I mean, obviously, I think there's a difference between mentors and then influences, because obviously Dana was a big influence on me, just because she invested time in my personal life and my career, right? And I think that's what a mentor does. But aside from that, I have hundreds and hundreds of influences that I probably couldn't list every one of them, but they were people that I've spent time with, of people that I have relationships, friends of mine now through the business, who we listen to in workshops, who we go watch teach. There's tons. I mean, early on, guys like Chuck Evans, some of the old school guys, older guys that really helped me, and who I sort of picked things up with. Chuck Cook, Jim McClain, Butch Harmon, all those guys were guys you kind of looked up to as a young coach. There's a lot more, obviously, Jim Hardy. So nowadays it's like the people that I surround myself with now, John Graham in putting, James Rudyard in short game, Scott Calx has been a huge influence on me, just full swing, with his friendship and certification, that I recommend everybody goes and does that. Tyler Farrell, 3D guys, Mark Bull, John Sinclair. I mean, all these people that you basically, if you're paying attention, you start picking up little tidbits and little nuggets of things along the way that you sort of put in your toolbox and use on your lesson tee. And as I always leave my podcast, I say, study, practice, teach, right? So you do the study, and then you go and you apply it to yourself, or you go and figure out, does it work in a lesson? And then you go share it with somebody else. So that's kind of the evolution, but there's too many to list. Putt, if we start talking about putting, definitely, John Graham, David Orr, Phil Kenyon. I know you've had those guys on your show, have been great influences and great help to me. Mark Sweeney, I know we're both aim point guys, has been huge, which kind of got me really pushed in that direction. I think when I joined aim point 10 years ago, guys like Mike Shannon, I've spent some time with, Todd Sones. I mean, whoever would let me come watch them teach or pick the phone up and answer my questions has been really, really helpful. And then again, you start teaching a lot, and you start developing your own style and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And then that's sort of how we get to who we are.
For sure. So many cool guys you mentioned there, and a lot of them I know, a lot of them I don't, but one name that stuck out, who's one of my mentors, is Mark Bull, and I know you've spent quite a bit with him. Yeah. He's like one of the coolest dudes I know, and like probably, well, one of the best communicators I've seen coach live. What it was, perhaps that can lead on nicely to my next question, which was, what do you think are the main skills or the most important skills of a coach? Answer that question for me, Jason. Then what's the biggest thing you've learned from Mark Bull?
Well, just recently, I've sort of studied him a little bit from afar. And then just recently had him on the podcast, and going to have him on again, because I think we just scratched the surface, but you start changing your language, when you talk to guys that smart, right? It's like now I call people movers instead of, golfers, right? So
Yeah.
it's just, understanding how the body moves. And it's more obviously in a full swing perspective, but I would love to get more into 3D, like with putting. And I've talked to David about it, and he's done a lot of stuff, but I've never had the 3D equipment to do it. But just, I think more about, as far as like what the best coaches do, is they have that ability to ask the right questions, gather enough information to make a good hypothesis, and then they're good problem solvers, right? And I think that's what we are for sure as a putting coach. It's difficult. I've done a lot of putting workshops and presentations, but it's very difficult to give a blanket statement about putting because everybody's so different, right? And they're so individualistic. Every lesson is different. And people come watch me teach putting, at the end they're usually like, well, why'd you do that? And a lot of times I can't even answer that, right? It's a lot of instinct. I think good coaches have that sort of inner voice that allows them to move and make really good decisions. And then also, I think good coaches are willing to make mistakes, right? They're willing to push the limits of what they're trying to do with their player, and then know when to pivot when it's not working, right? So it's a lot of that, right? Communication obviously is thrown around, but I think they're good listeners. I think they do a good job of, again, when you ask questions, it's not just like because, oh, we know we need to do an interview prior to every lesson, but what are you really doing with that information that the player gives you? Are you just listening to the words, or are you truly watching how they say it? What's their body language look like? How are they standing? Where are their eyes going? All the stuff that which I call kind of the EQ stuff, the intangibles, I think make up a good coach. And it's difficult to train, but it's something that's super important, I think, to getting to that next level. Because if not, you're just becoming sort of a robot, and it's not, how would I say, it's you're not flexible enough to like move in and out of different positions and treat people differently. Cause again, everybody's got their own style, personality, all this stuff. So there's, as I always tell my guys, teaching is a moving target, right? That's why all golf lessons don't look the same, and all fixes aren't, even the same problem can be fixed about 100 different ways. It's up to you as the coach to figure out which one's the right one.
Yeah,
Does that make
absolutely.
any sense?
Yeah, no,
I know I'm
totally.
rambling a little bit.
No, totally. I think, yeah, absolutely. Like that listening. That's something the biggest thing I've learned from Mark is how he talks about, like, listen to the question people say. It's amazing
Yeah.
when, and postural sway. By the way, he come onto your podcast. What was that? 3 months ago, 2 months ago
Yeah,
now?
that's right.
Is it nearly 2 hours long? I think I listened to it 8 times. Not
Yes.
even joking.
Yeah.
The best, and I'll add it to the show notes. It's the best podcast I've ever listened to.
Oh,
And
wow.
the one
Thanks.
I always go back to and listen to.
All credit to him. I'll tell you this. I'm now working out in bare feet. I'm not wearing
I
shoes. Oh yeah, because of him. He's like, it made total sense. Like, as he said, your skin is your best shoes. And
the best shoes.
I
Yeah.
always work out in bare feet now.
What about postural sway? Do you remember him talking about that?
I think, yeah, I mean, definitely, again, we look very closely at how the pelvis moves. Definitely, obviously in full swing and even in putting, right? So, sway and thrust, as David Orr calls it.
Yeah.
I look at that a lot. So it's like, how important is it to get your players stable in putting? I think it's super important, right? So whatever you believe in creates that. I use body track, and people don't realize how many times I put people on the putting mat or on the pressure mat with putting, just to see what's going on. If there's movement or if there's not. But yeah, I think, getting the joints lined up correctly or in a stable position, I think is important, regardless of if you're making a putting stroke or swinging at 130 miles an hour.
For sure. It's important to stand well. He was also mentioning when he's like, when you're standing still, you're still moving. And I think he called it posture sway or something is what he called it, which is something along those lines. But it's interesting because he'll talk about perception, reality, and truth. And I was with Mark last week, and I said, what I've just said to you, like, it's the best podcast. I keep it. And he's like, really? He said, like, I felt terrible that day. I was really ill. Do you remember?
Yeah. He was not feeling well. Yeah, he was not feeling well at all. And I was like, man, you're bringing it. So that's why I said, what happens on a lot of podcasts, I probably didn't get to half the questions that I wanted to ask him. And Robbie, one of my teachers, was co-hosting and was doing a great job because he studies his stuff too. And I was like, man, we got to do this again. So definitely got to get him back on for part 2 next year.
100%. Yeah. And Robbie's a cool cat. I really enjoyed him.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. I want to connect with him. So talking of good guys, like, I think it's the last podcast you did, or if I've missed one, but unless I've missed one, 17th of December, Butch Harmon.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. How was that for you? Like, if there's a golf instructor in the world, surely he's up there.
He's been number one for how many years, right? I mean, for a reason. So, and I think, and I've known Butch and studied his work and spent some time with him over the years, but there's a few guys that, when getting them on the show, that I was a little nervous, right? So, because you want to do a good job, and I had done so much prep work, and you would crack up to see how many notes I had, and I had all intentions of going right down the list of kind of how I wanted the podcast to go, and that lasted about 5 minutes because he started going off on tangents. So basically, I just basically teed it up and just let him roll. Man, it was fantastic, and I can't tell you how many DMs and messages, and even like my members are coming in saying, gosh, I just heard that podcast you did with Butch. That was so fun. Because he was just so open and honest about, guys that he was working with and his career. And like I said, he wasn't afraid to say, hey, I was in a bad place, and this is what I did to get out of it. These are the people that helped me. He's just such a good guy. It was really, it was just an honor to spend that much time with him. And we're 2 hours and 20 minutes into it. And he's like, I got to go to dinner. I'm like, dude, I haven't got to half my stuff. And he goes, we'll have to do it again. But it couldn't have been nicer. Right. Everybody's like, well, how'd you get a hold of him? Like, I just DM'd him. He's on Instagram. Right. So I was like, all right, let me shoot him a DM. Literally 5 seconds later, he goes, I'd love to do it. And come to find, and you heard on the podcast, he's a fan. Right. So he was actually listening to the podcast. I was like, that just blows me away. And when you ask why I do it, it's like, that's the kind of stuff, right? As soon as I figure out that, gosh, it's just too much work, I just can't do it anymore. I get an email, or I get somebody that says, man, like yourself, said, man, keep doing it. You're affecting other people. And I got to keep going, I guess. We'll see what happens. But that was a fun one for sure.
You've definitely got to keep going. Yeah. You're not allowed to retire. What was the biggest learning you had from Butch in that conversation, or perhaps in previous meetings?
Yeah, I think again how important the coaching piece is, right? So it's not, nobody's gonna say that he's like the most technical guy, or he knows the most really about each part of the golf swing, or and that's not what makes him great. Right. And it's spending time with guys like him, and like guys like Kevin Kirk, which is a fantastic podcast I did a couple of weeks ago. It's like you realize how important it is to have those people skills. Right. So, and he'll tell you, like, I just tell my guys the truth. Right. I'm not going to say that they're good if they suck. Right. So it's like but then again, knowing what to say and when to say it, when to kick somebody in the butt, motivate them, when to give them a hug. It was just all that stuff that obviously has made him great. And he gets, you can't argue with the results. He's had some of the best players in the world. He's coached 4 number ones in the world. Nobody can say that. Right. So it's just like the intangibles, and just, again, like going back to what my legacy wants to be, is like just helping other people. Right. He's not afraid to share. He's not afraid to let them. I know so many people have gone to his facility and watched him coach. I mean, he's good to do that, right? I mean, he doesn't need to do that. Gosh, he's achieved everything that a golf coach could ever do.
Mhm.
But he continues to get better and continues to learn and continues to kind of give back. So that was kind of the biggest thing that I knew, but I'm glad he was able to kind of share it with everybody else, because I think it was that podcast is going to go down in history. I think is one of the greatest.
Definitely better than Mark's, do you reckon? better
Mm.
than Mark Bulls.
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, just in a different way, right? I mean,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
the
totally.
stories, right? Just the stories and stuff. And no, I mean, that's what's great about our game, right? We have all these different, uh, really smart people that sort of bring us together, whether
Sure.
it's 3D guys or putting guys or short game or full swing or just, just great overall coaches. That's why, we can't fall asleep at the wheel, man. You gotta keep going and keep moving forward, or you're just going to get lapped.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's exciting to keep going. Well, that's that's I wake up every morning still wanting to. I love the smell of possibility in the morning. That's one of my quotes. I just like,
I
right, let's
love it.
go. So,
Good. Yeah,
so let's talk about putting. Let's go.
sure.
Let's go. You've got a beginner golfer come to you, first ever golf lesson, or just started took up the game. It's like, Jason, golf guru guy, you're the main man here. I want to be putting like a tour player in 6 months. What does
Wow.
what do you not work on, but yeah, how do you sort of
Yeah.
structure that, and what sort of skills are you looking for?
I mean, I don't get that many beginners anymore, but I mean, it's funny. I had this conversation with John Graham, not long ago. I think a couple other guys, and we were just talking about, like, how would you teach putting to somebody that knows nothing about the game? And one of the things that we kind of came up with was starting with rolling balls on the green, like with a perfect putter, right? So just getting the player to, again, I think one of the most underrated skills in putting as a learner is being able to truly watch the ball roll, right? Watching where the ball starts, watching the curve, and watching where it finishes. And then in relation to whatever your intention was, I think that's a good place to start, is just rolling some golf balls on the green, and maybe even just having them roll balls with their hand at the hole and just sort of watching what happens. And then I would, in a beginning situation, I would back into, obviously you got to show them, how to hold it and how to stand, and start to make some little strokes. I would probably start them really close to the hole, honestly, give them some success, have them make a couple of 1, 2, 3 foot putts, and then ultimately try to work on some touch, right? Explaining, the length of the stroke, and, some of just the basics of, sweet spot control and face angle, and, just get them to start rolling balls. And I'm a big fan of putting and doing a lot of putting drills without the hole.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, getting him to putt to a ghost hole, or putt to a fringe, or putt to a tee, because I think it takes sort of that expectation of make or miss result out of it. That's what I would do. It just sort of back into the mechanics a little bit, like I do with any player, with less detail, obviously, with a beginner, but just getting in the roll balls on the ground, and then just have them watch, and then just talking, discussing what happened, right? Get them to give you a little bit of feedback on what they see, and, their ideas.
I love that. It's like, yeah, they're learning from their mistakes early on, aren't they? So
Yeah.
like,
Right.
you take away, I think, like in the past, how I've taught putting, how I was taught, it's like, right, you grip it like this, you stand like this, you got to do this, you got to do this motion, it's all sort of, you try and build a robot,
Mm-hmm.
the golfer into a robot, and then they hit a 5 foot putt 20 foot, and they're like, that they don't know why. Do you know what I mean? So I think
Right. Yeah.
I love the way that you learn from your mistakes there. You're rolling balls, you're watching it. Did that break like I expected it? Did it? Obviously, with a perfect putter, it starts online, or if someone rolls it with their hand, they pretty much started online. but they're understanding break and speed, aren't they? And uphill and downhill. So
Well, and they're learning from their environment, right? So again, it's like that's why I think putting is so difficult, because every putt's its own entity, right? So you have different environment. The environment changes sometimes by the hour,
yeah,
right? So it's not just by the day. Green speeds change. Obviously, slopes are different. You know, there's a lot going on that makes it very difficult to get that ball in the hole.
absolutely. How do you or is that that's the best way, or that's how you sort of train people in their environment to adapt? As you say, like a 10-foot putt can play like a 5-foot putt, or it can play like a 15-foot putt, can't it? Depend on the environment.
Yeah.
Talk me through how, like, perhaps the listeners, perhaps a nugget there on judging distance control that the listeners could take away.
I mean, again, it's like I start every lesson with, the poker chip drill, or, putting a quarter on the ground and having them roll the ball and try to stop it on that poker chip. Right. So it forces them to basically solve all of the problems, or all of the, and develop all of the skills that is required for putting, right? Start line speed and break prediction. So getting them to roll golf balls, and having them understand that there's the first skill is stopping the ball where they want to stop it. And I think that's got to be the first key that you introduce before you can introduce green reading, or stroke mechanics, or anything. I think I basically test my players, and then sort of based on what I find and the outcomes, sort of back into the stroke. That way it gives me a little bit better insight of like what I'm going to change and what I'm going to leave alone. Form over, function over form, rather. As you say, it's like not all putting strokes look alike. I mean, there are some stuff that I think that we definitely enjoy, right? Preferences. I mean, let's face it. I don't care who you are out there teaching. Everybody has a preference of what they want things to look like. Mm-hmm. We all sort of gravitate towards that, but then the good coaches can sort of, like I said, make changes based on functionality and outcomes and performance. And I think that's the key. So, I mean, I guess, I have lots of drills and whatnot, but I mean, I think that's where you always have to start. And then just recognizing, the environment, whether it's how, what kind of slope are you dealing with, what's the green speed, and then just hitting a lot of putts. Again, changing every so often to where you're not sitting there hitting the same putt over and over, I think is important too. Because adaptability, I think, is a very undervalued skill as well. I mean, one of the drills that I learned from Phil Kenyon, I was watching him at the Masters a few years ago, working with Stenson, was just putting balls through a ghost hole, and he would basically vary the intention, right? So he had one like 6 inches, a foot, and then maybe 2 feet or 3 feet behind the hole, and then getting them to basically change that intention every putt, I think is very, very important. So that would be my advice, is just learning, again, having an intention, having a distance choice, and then putting to that. And then again, assessing how did we do, and then moving, to another putt and doing the same thing. So it's just a lot of that, and people aren't willing to do it, right? It's like, I want to be a better putter, but they aren't really willing to put in the work, I think, to improve their putting. Putting can be trained, but let's face it, it's not the most exciting part of the game, right? We're just rolling a ball on the ground. But I think it's the most difficult if you're going to be really good at it. I think it can be challenging, and people give up. I think I'll go hit drivers. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's well, I would say it is the most interesting part of the game.
No doubt. Yeah.
I love it. I'm just like, yeah, it is just rolling the ball on the ground, but there's something about it, like, I don't know, I can't hit more than 5 drivers in a row and I just get bored on the range. But I can roll balls. Coach. I can roll balls on the green, watch it, hit different lines, different speeds, as you're talking about. I listened to the Phil Kenyon on your podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and he mentioned that drill. Or I think you mentioned it to him.
Yes.
And he was saying how he's took the coins away for Stenson now, but they're still having the same intention.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I love that drill. I've stole that from you both for sure.
And you don't need a ghost hole. You can use an old hole plug, right? It's just, again, it's rolling it across something and then making it stop somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think is what's important. And again, if you can do that fairly well, the rest of it becomes more manageable.
100%. Yeah, you're just matching your intention, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Matching your speed with your intention, or matching
Mm-hmm.
your intention with your speed. Yeah, one of the, whichever way around it is.
They're kind of one and the same, right? It's capture speed, and again, it's basically starting with that in mind and then building the picture backwards. And helping them understand that there's not just one solution to the problem, right? So even though, aim point, we say ideally we'd want the ball to stop 6 to 12 inches by the hole, that's not hard and fast, right? We can, like, if I got somebody that's putting uphill, I might change the intention to 2.5, 3 feet, understanding the probability of that ball coming up short, right? Or if it's severely downhill, something I've been sort of messing with as far as, again, like intention versus reality is often different as well. If it's severely downhill, I'll actually move the intention short of the hole, knowing that the chances of them leaving it short is very slim. So they end up sort of falling into that center dispersion, ends up being somewhere close to where you want it speed wise. But again, you're taking away the probability of 3-putting or leaving yourself a putt. But again, it's like, whatever it is, if you got a player, I mean, I heard like Ian Poulter, I think Mark Sweeney was talking about, he likes to hit his putts 3 feet by the hole, which I don't recommend, but if you do, then he's got to match his lineup, which is going to be different than somebody that wants to drip it in. Right. So it's just, I don't care what it is, it just has to match. Right.
Absolutely. That's, although putting, there's lots to it. It is matching line and speed. That's all we're doing, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's interesting stuff. Something you mentioned there was like painting the picture. Talk me through when you play, what is your what's the simulations you play in your head, or what's your visualization or targeting strategy?
I mean, I would say, and I'll share with the listeners too, that something that we learned from Mark Sweeney a few years ago, that's really, I think, taken my teaching to another level as far as teaching the picture, is how important, and me and JG talk about this all the time, is how important the last third of the putt is as far as visualizing. So I start with the intention in mind and then sort of work backwards. So if we build, and I do this with every lesson, especially good players, show them the different piece or the anatomy of a putt, right? So the intention, the entry point, and then what we now call the drop point, which is a point on the curve in between the hole and the apex, which would be halfway. And John Hardesty actually coined it the clown's mouth, the apex, the top of the break, and then your starting point, your start line, and then the ball, right? So you can kind of get people to build it out. But one of the biggest things that I've learned that's helped a lot of my players is, even if you know the exact aim point, let's say we're reading a 15-foot putt and it breaks 3 feet, and you know exactly where you want to start the ball, most players tend to see too much curve in the last third of the putt. So the entry point is too high, right? So now, even though you know where you need to start the ball, your intuitive brain is going to start it higher than you think, higher than it needs to. Especially good players will tend to overread the break and miss it high. So I use a cool little device, a little ring that goes around the hole that shows you the proper entry point based on the percentage of slope. And once I show them that and then show them where the drop point is, it changes their whole perception of the curve. The curve is much flatter than they visualize. And that way their internal GPS can match up the line and the speed much easier. And I think if players out there, especially good players out there listening, tour players, I can show you this, but if they would work more on that stuff, okay, understanding that their stroke is probably not as far off as they think, unless you got just a completely crazy, tendency to not be able to start the ball reasonably online, that will help you probably quicker than anything else. But you have to practice it, right? You got to go and find a putt. You got to build the picture out. And then what I'll do is a lot of times once we build the picture out, I'll have strings going everywhere or whatever. And obviously it's really busy. Again, I'm watching the player and sort of monitoring what's the performance like, have them hit putts. And then I'll start taking things away, right? We'll take the apex away, take the start line away, take whatever. So then you start figuring out how they perceive the information and how they visualize for them. Like I've had people that do really well. I had a mini tour player that did really well with all of it. And basically he was sort of that analytical type player where he had to sort of go through the whole process to check the boxes, and every time he would check the boxes, he would calm down more. Right. Where a lot of people, he kind of that Bryson DeChambeau, probably typical thing, right? The more information he gets, the more calm and the more confident he gets. Some people aren't like that, right? Some people just need one. They might just need the intention or maybe even the entry point, whatever it is. But you got to figure that out as a coach to figure out how they best perform and how they visualize. And then obviously the performance and the testing is going to play out. But that last third of the curve is massively important. Seems like every time I get a tour player that comes to me, the first thing they want to know is their stroke perfect and am I starting the ball online? And guess what? Their speed is awful, right? Because they have no clue where the ball should be halfway through the putt or the last third of the putt, and they have no idea what it should look like in order to kind of connect the dots. So once you start doing that, and I'm an hour and a half into the lesson, and maybe I haven't even messed with their stroke yet, and they're holding putts, and they're going, "Oh wow, I haven't even thought about my stroke at all." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I mean, not that mechanics isn't important, because I change mechanics every day for putting, but I'll back into it to where, okay, this is, face is closing, ball starting left. Yeah, we got to fix that, right? Because now our intuitive and our cognitive start lines and pictures are not going to match up. So, but there's a time and place, and you have to have that sort of, I call it reverse engineering, right? So if I started with the stroke first and didn't understand how they read greens or how their speed was, then I think I would be doing that player a disservice. And I couldn't help him. And I used to do that. I mean, I didn't start doing probably the right thing till, again, JG's been a huge influence on me as far as structuring a putting lesson, doing more testing, doing more, reconnaissance before I start messing with players, especially if they're playing for a living. I mean, it's a big deal. So probably a long winded answer to your question, but that's kind of how I roll.
No, I love the nuggets you gave us there, Jason. And like as you say, I think the big nugget is how people do expect the ball to go. They expect to go straight for a long time and then dive off at the end. And as we know, it's more like a banana.
Exactly, and a flatter banana.
Yeah.
Now that we understand, yeah, drop point I think was huge, because it's just I mean, you don't know it until you experience it and you start talking to players, you start seeing them roll putts, and then once they understand that concept, then they can go and practice it, and they start to change their visuals, and then they start to get better. It's pretty amazing.
It is, and it's amazing and like on visualization, seeing the whatever they see on the ground, seeing it is super important because it improves their skill.
Yes.
It improves their speed and confidence and calms them down. But also, I think a key thing I took away from what you said there is that there's more than it's finding the best way to visualize for them.
Yes.
Because there's so many ways to visualize a putt.
Yeah, you got to have again, it starts with, what's your speed and pace going to be, right? So I mean, one putter that sort of sees the ball dying in, and another putter that is a bit more aggressive, they're going to have a different solution and a different start line and a different picture, right? But they, as long as you can understand that, and you don't know that until you start asking better questions. And, I always ask my players, like, when, take me back to the last time you felt like you really hold a lot of putts. How fast is the ball going in? Right? Is it dripping over the edge? Is it hitting the back of the hole? Is it kind of in the middle? So you start understanding. And then when you start doing the poker chip drill, you start seeing patterns of like, okay, well, you told me this, but I'm seeing something else. Let's, what I mean? Like, so then because a lot of times our players aren't observant enough to even answer that question. Right. So it's like, you got to sort of lead them into, oh yeah, that's when I'm holding putts, I feel really confident. Maybe I'm knocking it a little bit farther past the hole because I'm not scared of three putting or whatever it is. Like, you just have to gather that information in order for you to help that player the most.
Totally. Talk us through some aim point then, Jason. Talk us through aim point and how it helps golfers. How you see it helps.
Well, I mean, when I first started aim point, I guess nine years ago, it was right when I first got to Carmel, we used to use a chart, right, which was so accurate. I mean, it's amazing the work that Mark Sweeney's put in to the system. And it started with the line on the Golf Channel, right? It was a computer model that he developed into a teaching model. So, but it was pretty complicated to the average golfer. Right? We had to come up with about 4 or 5 different variables. We had to look at a chart, and then we had to get an answer. Then we had to go and putt. So when he developed Aim Point Express now, which the listeners out there have seen players, holding fingers up, it became a heck of a lot simpler, right? So now it's very, very easy and takes literally less than 10 seconds on an average length putt, to where all we're doing basically is trying to figure out slope value and slope and side tilt of the putt in between the ball and the hole. And we teach our players to use their feet and feel the ground, and then start to, we use levels and, digital levels to sort of check ourselves and train our feels to figure out how much, what the percentage of slope is in between the ball and the hole. And then we hold that amount of fingers up, and it gives us a nice little picture of where the ball needs to start and what we call sort of the putt cone, right? So where the ball needs to start relative to the hole, it gives you that cone to where the ball sort of needs to roll in based on, again, your intention. Guys, we sort of, it's all built in, all the information is built in from the chart. As everybody asks, like, what about green? What about all this stuff? I'm like, it's all built in. That's always, it's like, it's just trusted. Because you can't imagine how easy it is based on, all the information that's been gathered. So, but again, what I like about Aim Point Express, it allows our players to still be athletic in the fact that, again, you determine your distance choice and how hard you want to hit the ball. And then you can adjust your arm bend and all that to sort of match that up. But again, especially for newer golfers, I think they don't even know which way it's going to break. Right. I mean, it's like just getting them to feel something with their feet and use their appropriate receptors and their balance just to figure out the direction, I think is massive. Like I don't push aim point on all my players, but I'll show them when I do green reading tests. I mean, I'll show them how much they suck. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing when we're testing, is like showing them. Typically a player comes to you, they're not putting very well anyways, right? Something's going wrong. You don't ever get somebody that comes and say, yeah, I'm putting great. Why don't you give me a lesson? Right. So something's going wrong. So usually if it's a green reading problem, then we'll figure out what's going on. And then, but at least get them to use their feet, right? Walk around a little bit, even if they don't want to use their fingers and don't want to do the whole system. I always tell even good players, I'll tell them, it's worth going through the whole process just to get the information. Then it's up to you to decide what you want to use. But I guarantee if I was playing for a living, I would be on that so fast that it's ridiculous. It's a slight, as I say, it's a slight edge that I think if you think you can just sit there and look at a green and be a great green rememberer and putt at the highest level, I think you're crazy. And even the best players in the world don't read greens that great. Okay. They just ball strike their rear end off sometimes and shoot a score. But I mean, I think it's fantastic. I mean, it's a game changer for anybody. I would highly recommend it.
Awesome. Sounds good. Okay, let's finish with what is the best bit of advice you've been given? Then I want you to give the listeners one best bit of advice from the golf guru to finish with. And the third bit then is a 2-minute chat about wine on. I want you to give us a lesson on selecting wine.
Oh gosh. So the first, that was about 6 questions in one there.
3 questions. Sorry. Yeah. Let's start with the best bit of advice you've ever received.
Oh man. That's a tough one. I mean, is in respects to like just career or
life.
Somebody told me once, stay humble, stay nervous. I think that's a good life lesson that you can apply to pretty much anything. I think if you get, and Dana used to, it wasn't Dana, but Dana used to say things to me all the time that sort of was up that alley. Mm-hmm. Basically try to always be uncomfortable, because if you're uncomfortable, you're growing. So if you're too comfortable, then you're probably standing still. So I'm always trying to like put myself in positions to get uncomfortable. Let's just, that was like the podcast, right? I was nervous. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd not, I wouldn't say I'm the greatest on the mic. So I think that's good. That's good advice for anybody in all walks of life, is just try to put yourselves, I mean, just stretch, right? I mean, it's like people don't realize when I was a young professional how shy and backwards, and I was afraid to talk to people. I mean, I almost got fired from my first job because I wouldn't speak to the members. I was just, I was just shy, right? So I had to come out of that. And that was one of the things I worked on early on. I knew to be a top coach, I needed to improve my presentation skills, my communication skills. And it didn't happen overnight. It's something I worked on. Like I went to classes, I read books, I practiced in the mirror. Like it's just, things like that. I was terrified to get up in front of 3 people and give a presentation, much less hundreds. And I've spoken to hundreds of people now and my peers, which just made me super uncomfortable. But the more you do it, the better you do. So I'm kind of looking for that next big thing. What was the second one? Advice to the listeners.
Get like some low hanging fruit that you can give them, like tip of the day.
So for average golfers, I would say,
to reduce their handicap by between 5 and 10 shots in one round.
Oh wow!
No, I'm joking.
So I'll give them just a broad answer. Not so much a tip, but there's so much information out there now on the internet, and I'm putting just as much out there as anybody. But I would say find yourself a good coach that has a good reputation. Do your homework, ask a lot of questions. But you need to have an expert on your team that can help you filter out the information that's good for you and not good for you. Right? There's lots of great information out there, but it's not always applicable to whatever your tendencies are in your game, whatever you're trying to change. So I would say, as we do as coaches, we're trying to raise our students' golf IQs by helping them understand themselves first, right? How are they moving? Again, I would hope that one of my players, if you called them up on the phone and said, "Hey, what are you working on, and what's your tendency?" they could tell you, which is a skill in itself, right?
Sure.
So you've got to have that filter, and then trust the coach, right? I mean, and understand that learning is not a straight line deal, right? There's a lot of ebbs and flows. You're going to get worse. You're going to get better. You're going to get worse. I mean, it's just part of the learn. And we're trying to learn what I think is the hardest game in the world, right? People don't realize it's the best game, but it's also, that's why it's the best, because it's so challenging that I don't pull any punches and tell people that golf's hard. Okay. You get that question, well, why am I doing that? I don't know. Golf's really hard, man. You can't, there's just no way to explain it, right? You're not going to be great every day. You're not going to be your same self every day. Your body changes. But the people that adapt and the people that can not get so frustrated, I always say, get fascinated, be fascinated instead of frustrated. Figure out, be curious instead of just getting pissed all the time. Like, oh, why did I do that? Well, what happened there? Like, get more information. It's just all that stuff. Like I said, it's a moving target for the students, just as easy it is for the coaches. But that's a long answer, but it's a very important part. I think if you're going to get better as a player, is learning how to sort of sift through all the information that's out there.
I love that. It's yeah, there's so much, isn't there? There's so much out there. You can get, like, if you said improve your putting, you type that into YouTube, there'll be a million videos you can watch.
Yeah. And there's conflicting information. There you go. Yeah, there's conflicting information that, you got to figure out, what's right and what's wrong. Or what's going to work for you. And they might both be right for somebody, right? It's just it's difficult. That's why it's tough. That's what's such a cool game, but it's such a hard game.
Do you know what though? Moving on to wine, it's the same thing. It's the same thing, right? It's like there's so many wines out there. Like how many grapes there? Like thousands of grapes,
right?
Countries, price points, fruit, and all these different. So talk. Give us a tour guide for dummies.
Yeah, like we were talking about before we started recording, it's like basically the thing is to just go drink. I'm not an expert in wine. I just drink a lot of it. But it's just, it seems simple, but it's true. But I'm just like, I approach anything in life as I'm always trying to like figure out, the ins and outs. Like I'm fascinated, like how it's being made. And like I said, the different grapes. Documentary on Netflix called Somm. It's about how sommelier, like master sommeliers become master sommeliers. And I think that's cool. Like I try to read as much as you can. I use an app. I was just going to pull my phone up here. I use an app called Vivino. It's Vivino.
Yeah.
Before I buy any wine, you can scan it and it kind of tells you a little bit about the wine, tells you the rating. So I try not to drink anything that's under a 3.8 rating. But again, there's plenty of 10, 15, 20, like $20 to $30 bottles out there that will taste just as good as a $150 bottle. And we were talking about the one I had on Christmas. It was fine. It was $150. I got it in a wine club. I didn't buy it, but you just sort of, and then start taking notes, right? So, keep a journal on like what you bought, what you drank, why did you like it? We do like little wine tastings here. We're trying to educate my kids, which my kids are barely old enough to drink. So I'm not sure that I'm a father of the year, but I'm trying to pass it down a little bit to where try to, when they drink it, like talk about what you're tasting, pull out whatever your palate is, and it's going to change, right? And you add food to it. You start pairing steaks or chicken or fish or chocolate or whatever. It's going to make the wine taste different. So there's just a lot to it. But again, it's just study it. And the more you drink, the more you start to figure out what you like. I don't enjoy white wine. It's just I have a couple that are okay, but I'll drink a rosé occasionally if it's, during the summer, but I like a bold, and I like wines from all different countries. I love New Zealand and Spanish wines and Italian wines. I'm just fascinated with all the different regions and grapes and what years. There's a lot. You can get Wine Spectator. There's a good magazine where you can start to learn more about it as well. But it's just getting in there and digging around and figuring out what you like, honestly.
I love it. I love it. Brilliant. I've thoroughly enjoyed it today, Jason. I do appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
It was a good conversation. I'm sure the listeners will enjoy it too. Where do they find? I'll also put it in the show notes though. But talk us through like your website. I think everything's on your website, isn't it? But like your podcast, YouTube, social media platforms.
Yeah. So the Golf Guru Show is the podcast. You can find that on any platform that you get your podcast. Apple Podcast is kind of the most popular. My handle on social is at Golf Guru TV, which I know is kind of strange, but it came from when YouTube first came out, kind of like the podcast. I started a YouTube show years ago called Guru TV, and I just sort of turned that into my handle. And so you can find me on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter. Hit me up on Facebook. If you like golf, I'll friend you up. But I spend a lot of time on Instagram and Twitter, not as much on Twitter nowadays, but Instagram probably more than anything. So feel free to reach out. And my email is golfgurutv@gmail.com. And the website's golfgurutv.net if you want to check it out. So it's got some videos, and for coaches, I mean, there's some hidden gems on there. I used to do a workshop called the Guru Workshop for about 6 or 7 years. I'd host, and I'd always have top coaches come in, and I always filmed everything. And those presentations are on my website. So it's like people don't realize, I mean, I got Cameron McCormick and Claude Harmon and Mark Blackburn and John Sinclair. There's a lot of really great presentations on there that people probably don't realize. So, but thanks for having me, man. This has been a lot of fun. It's fun to be on the other side of the mic for a change.
Awesome. Great stuff. Yeah. That's the content on there is amazing, by the way. I had a look at it earlier. So it's lots of nuggets. So there he is again, sharing. He's come all the way from, what we were saying earlier. You were a lad who can't speak to people. Now he's a global superstar, man. So
people can change, I guess, right? If you work hard enough.
I love it. I love it. Thanks a lot for your time, Jason. Take it easy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.